Welcome to How They Won. I'm your host, Bob Burns, and every week I get successful real estate professionals across North America to share their secrets of success with you. In this episode, I interviewed Shannon Byerly with Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage in Denver, Colorado. Shannon has been in the business for 5 years, but you would think it has been longer based on her sales production. She was Rookie of the Year her first year in the business and has been absolutely crushing it every year since. In our conversation, Shannon and I discussed how to grow your business from an already busy base, breaking into the luxury market, including the good, the bad, and the ugly parts about that, coping with personal tragedy and setbacks in your business and continuing to move forward, as well as her unique approach to serving her customers. I think the advice that Shannon shared in this episode will absolutely have a positive impact on your business. Now, if you enjoy this episode, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. We're only going to be able to grow the show with your support. Thanks for listening. Here's my conversation with Shannon Byerly. This week's episode is brought to you by Leaders Edge Coaching. Full disclosure, I am a trainer and a coach with Leaders Edge. But like you, I can choose to do business with anyone. But I choose to work with Leaders Edge. Leaders Edge has the right experience, knowledge, and tools to help you take your business to the next level. Whether that means closing more transactions, or improving your work-life balance, or building a team the right way, the coaches and staff at Leaders Edge can help you achieve your goals. For more information, email coaching@howtheywon.com. That's coaching@howtheywon.com. I am really excited about today's guest. After only 5 years in the real estate business, she is already one of the top agents in the Denver marketplace. She was her company's Rookie of the Year in her first year and has been on a steep upward trajectory ever since. And this year, she's on track to have her best year ever in real estate, which is quite an accomplishment given how big of a year she had last year. Now, I have to come clean with everybody listening. She's also one of my coaching clients, which means that part of my job is to motivate and inspire her to push herself and reach new heights. But the truth is that she inspires me at least as much as I inspire her. So Shannon Byerly of Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage in Colorado, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Bob. I'm really delighted to be on today. Thanks for having me.
Very cool. So I want to start with something that you mentioned in your show prep, and of all of our conversations together, you've never mentioned this, and it intrigued me. You were on a showing and a ghost turned on a light. What happened there?
Yeah. So we were looking in kind of the more historic neighborhoods in Denver. And a lot of these homes in the West Coast, our ages are, relative. So 1940s, woo. So we're going into this home and we were going into the basement. And I had an interesting showing note that the agent had in there that said to not to be concerned about lights turning on and off in the basement, that it wasn't electrical.
Weird.
And we were just, so I had this really great woman by the name of Kendall, who was super sweet. And she really wanted to find a kind of iconic home in Denver. We're going down the basement stairs. It's super dark. It's more of a cellar at this point. I don't really know what we would utilize it for, but I needed to check it out. And I'm trying to find the light. And I'm like, where's the light? Where's the light switch over here? And then just boom, lights go on. I'm like, Kendall, did you turn on the light? She's like, nope. And I'm like, okay. And then it was this cool breeze that kind of came by both of us. We both could kind of see a little bit of a white apparition. So I looked at Kendall and I was like, okay, let's go on up to the upper level. I was like, we're going to go ahead and roll out. So to this day, she's like, when Shannon says it's time to roll out, I know it's something that we need to get out of here.
Wow, that's crazy. So at least it was a helpful ghost. It was turning on the lights for you.
Honestly. And I gave feedback to the agent, and the agent's like, yeah, we've had some issues during showings with lights turning on and off, depending on if the ghost per se liked who was touring through.
Okay, so I take it from the story that Kendall did not make an offer on this house?
We didn't offer on that house, but we did find a really lovely house later on.
That ghost must have been so disappointed.
It was great. It was fantastic.
Really cool. But you managed to pivot and sell her a different house instead.
Yes, but we would joke along on the next house that we're looking at. I was like, and right here is where we can keep the dead bodies.
That's awesome. All right. So I'm glad you shared that story. Let's flip over onto the business side. As I mentioned in the intro, you were Rookie of the Year, your first year in real estate, but I want to go backwards from there and maybe share a little bit about what your thought process was about getting into real estate. Why real estate? This is a really, really hard business. And I'm always curious, especially for top performers like you, of what was it that made you decide to do this?
So I had been in oil and gas for just a little over a year and a half, and the price of oil tanked, and I was part of the first round of layoffs. It was one of those times where I just was applying for my similar position, which was it was very boring as a technical writer, and it was just as boring as it sounds. Instead, I happened to catch the Today Show, and the Today Show was talking about how nowadays there's so many people that switch careers midlife and different parts of their life. And they brought these 5 women on that had done different things, had gone completely from one aspect to another. One ended up owning a yoga studio at the age of 50 and had always been in IT before that. So it really made me think about what I wanted to do versus what would have been kind of the normal next step. And I also really thought about how I was going to be able to achieve, because I'd been a stay-at-home mom. I was in middle management. I was never going to have the opportunity to really make much more than 3% per year or whatever that the company deemed acceptable. So I wanted to have the opportunity to really create my own wealth or opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's a couple things that I want to unpack about what you said. Had you ever thought about real estate prior to catching that Today Show episode?
So my ex-husband and I had owned flower shops, and we had purchased real estate commercial on the commercial side and had done executed leases with other businesses. And I just found it so fascinating when we were doing it. But the commercial side, although I dabble in it, and I have a couple closings that will be coming up with a commercial partner that I work with, it doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. So although I had experience in that part, I really wanted to be more on the residential side because I knew that would be a better fit for me. Okay,
so you were kind of primed a little bit to be inspired to go down this path of real estate. You had liked real estate in the real estate process, although maybe not as much on the residential. And this kind of thing that you saw sparked you, was the right thing at the right time, found you.
Oh yeah. And I, like a lot of people, was watching a lot of some network TV with $1 million listings and everything else. And it looks so fun. You could create your own schedule. So some of this was, as I learned later on, definitely made for TV. But that also did kind of impact me, where I thought, oh, this looks like fun. I'll show houses. It will be a good time.
Right.
And although I enjoy my work, I have come to realize that is the TV is very not what a real life agent does.
So absolutely. And I think TV can help us in this business and it can hurt us in this business. We have to realize that it's a show, and a lot of times it's scripted. It's not reality, even though it's put forward as reality TV. So what was different? What was different when you actually got into real estate than what you had anticipated? And what was the same?
So I took a class. I did actually the in-person class because I just thought that would probably be better for my style of learning. And I think the biggest surprise was that really the test, everything else does not prepare you at all for what you're going into. So that was probably my biggest surprise in initially getting started in real estate.
Makes sense. So what advice would you give someone in your same shoes, looking for a career change, wondering if they can do it? They come across real estate. They're kind of excited, but they don't really know what it's about. What one thing should a person in that situation be thinking about as they get their license?
I would recommend maybe asking someone to shadow for a day or two, and being specific, like, can I shadow you on a listing appointment, or can I shadow you while you're even showing properties? Because coming in as a team, it is impressive to any seller or to any buyer. So there's no downside. And I completely believe in the giving back philosophy. I had sat down with a real estate agent that isn't with Coldwell initially to talk about her experience. And she was so wonderful and positive. Jessica was like, you can do this. It's, you've got the personality for it. I totally believe in you in it. And I try to pay that forward whenever there's an opportunity of a newer agent or somebody that's thinking about getting into the business. I'm happy to sit down and have coffee and chat with them about it.
I think that's awesome. And hopefully what this conversation is just a broad scale coffee chat with Shannon Byerly that folks can learn from. So fast forward, you got licensed and your person encouraged you to do it. You went through the process. That didn't at all prepare you for the reality of real estate. It just prepared you to pass the test. So you obviously passed the test, but your first year, you absolutely crushed it. What do you attribute that to? What was it? What was the magic ingredient?
Well, some of it is definitely I was lucky enough to I interviewed several companies, and Coldwell Banker had just a phenomenal training program. At the time, and it morphs. At the time when I went through, it was called Star 90, which was basically 90 days until you get your first contract. And it really went through the process of what you needed to do to start to build your business. But even more depth-wise, Andy Summer, my managing broker, he does weekly coaching sessions, and he would sit down with me and keep me accountable for what I had done that day, how many contacts I had made over the week. We talked about spinning plates, where my business was going to come from. Was it from a sphere? Was it from door knocking? Was it from open houses? And those weekly sessions helped keep me very much accountable, and also on a path of what to do. So I knew that if I was talking to 25 people each week and giving out my cards and not being a secret agent, that I was likely to be able to get appointments, which would then lead to a transaction.
Totally makes sense. And I think you've touched on something where a lot of real estate professionals go wrong. And we know that the average realtor spends 18 months in the business before they fizzle out. Something like 80% of people don't make it the first year and a half. I think one of the differences, and I'd like your opinion on this based on what you just said, I think one of the differences is, yes, we're independent contractors. However, having some direction, structure, and guidance from somebody who's been here and some accountability, I think is one of the difference makers for the 20% that make it. What do you think?
Absolutely. I also was fortunate in that first year to take Chris Leader's class. He comes out every 2 years to our market. And I was new enough to not be afraid of so many of the things that he said to do too. I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to go door knock 50 doors and do a personal invitation to an open house. It was fantastic to have these items of check mark, do this, do this, do this. And if you have the opportunity when you get into the business, make sure you are interviewing several different companies, because they are different and they have approaches, and some of them are not really built for the newer agents. So make sure to ask what types of training they have and how they support newer agents.
That is excellent advice. Now, I'd like to shift away from your first year in the business to your current year in the business. You've been on this hockey stick shaped upward trajectory year after year. You keep topping yourself. Talk a little bit about the growth that you've seen in your business, and the upsides of that growth is obviously more income and more success and more referrals. The business, I think, gets a little easier, but there's two sides to every story. So talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of all the success that you've achieved.
Right. So I'm fortunate. I'm in a masterminds group of women that there's 6 of us that meet once a month, and they're fantastic. We did vision boards I think it was probably 3 years ago that we started with our vision boards. And that was life changing, just really doing the power of positive. And I also took a ninja course. Yeah, I'm ninja. So it's an approach of really keeping positive as well, and having tasks that you have to do. It's not just thinking you're going to do well. It's also relatable with notes and different steps that I had to take to get where I am. So those were really game changers for me, having goals on a board every day that I was seeing. And they were goals from everything from like yoga to traveling to just, it wasn't just business. And I think that that's kind of a mistake we can make sometimes, is not really putting our own personal lives in the forefront. We're very quick to cancel on our loved ones. We're quick to make plans with people and then change them because we get a listing appointment or whatnot. So I would say the hard part about being busy is trying to keep balance. I try to tell myself every morning that I have exactly enough time to get done what I need to today. I also try to start with some meditation and writing out my goal 25 times on a piece of paper. So all those things probably sound a little hocus pocus, but it really does come to reality when you can do that part. It was challenging trying to juggle the kid. My son just entered high school. My daughter's in middle school. It was really challenging this summer to hang out with them. I felt like a part of my summer, I felt like I didn't even see my kids. Luckily, I had an awesome person to come in and help. Carly, love you. She's in college. When she leaves, I'm always so sad, but I couldn't do it without support. My mom supports me. My sister supports me. They're there to jump in when I can't be mom. So the hardest part for me is really trying to be Shannon in so many different places.
It sounds so simple, but one of the most important things to do, I think, is to ask. When you need help, ask. Yes, absolutely. And find ways that you're still being present. So when I am at home, I try to be present with them. Not having your phone near you at the dinner table. My kids they do make fun of me. They're like, we know when you're not listening, because you'll be like, and I'm just totally not, I have no idea. They might've just asked me for a vacation and I just agreed to it. But trying to be present and trying to really make sure that time that I spend with them is quality time. It's a matter of priorities and doing things on purpose. Let's talk a little bit more about this year in your business, because as your coach, one of the things that I've noticed is a greater and greater percentage throughout the year of your listings have been in the $1 million+ category. And you seem to be carving out a niche for yourself as a higher sale price type of agent. Would you agree with that?
Yes. So that was one of my goals, was to increase my average list price. I would say that that has definitely come into fruition this year. And you have to give yourself a little bit of time. When you first get into the real estate business, we all want $1 million listings, but it takes some time to build that kind of credibility with the luxury market. And careful of what you wish for, because they're expensive. They are, you need to have those quality touch and stay persistent with your clients. And they're very well educated people with regards to real estate. So you're not always the person that they're going to for advice. Your first time home buyer is going to worship you. So they'll listen to you. In the luxury market, you have to be able to really prove your value, and also be great at listening to what their goals are and what they're trying to accomplish.
That makes sense. What about being in this area of the market has surprised you?
The first thing that surprised me was that the contract's the same. So whether you're writing a $100,000 offer or a $1.25 million offer, it's the same. There are some caveats where your due diligence documents are probably a little bit different. You're asking for more items, you may be bringing architects in and different things that way. But that was probably the most surprising to me at first, was just that it really is very similar. And if you can remember that, it's not as daunting when you're first getting into it.
Yeah, isn't that feeling exciting of, you're a little bit intimidated or nervous about it. And then you discover that, hey, wait, I know how to do this.
Right, exactly. So you've already done it a million times. You're just adding different numbers in. And sometimes when you're asking the universe for things, they've always said that the universe doesn't know the difference between $1 and $1 million, and neither does the contract. So that's something you have to remember when you're starting to work with luxury clients.
I love that. The universe doesn't know the difference between $1 and $1 million. So one of the things you mentioned as you were talking about getting into the luxury market was it's expensive. What did you mean by that?
So although the contract is the same, the marketing is different. You are going to need to invest more money into the property for marketing. I bring in a stager, and that's a personal preference, whether you're asking your clients to pay for some of this, or whether you're paying for some of it, or whether you're paying for all of it, whatever you decide you're going to do. But you definitely, staging is very important in the luxury market, as well as even in I even stage at 200,000, to tell you the truth. But at the luxury market, obviously more square footage or higher end type situations on that. I also spend money on video from the luxury market, because oftentimes our clients aren't in Colorado. So this way I can send out videos to agents to try to pique their interest. And that way they can also send it over to their clients, that so they can get an idea on the property. The global luxury with Coldwell Banker has also other tools that you can invest in, where you can be seen more into that target buyer that you're trying to get. Because as you get higher in your list price, your pool is really so much smaller that you have to be able to identify who that buyer might be and really try to target market to that particular buyer.
That makes sense. And it also, all of the marketing efforts that you're doing, just based on the price point, the house is likely going to stay on the market longer than a lower price point home. So even the same things that you would do for all listings start to compound because you're doing them more frequently. Is that the case for you?
Yeah. And you have them longer. So you have to do some refreshing. You can't just give it say, okay, well, I already put it into this publication once 3 months ago. So that's kind of one of those pricing that you just don't really think about. And your client expects more out of you too. They know that your commission, once you successfully close on the home, is very good. So they expect you to also spend the money to market their home appropriately.
Makes sense. I want to shift a little bit and keep talking about this year, but and this is a little bit personal. So your father, who you were very close with, passed away pretty recently, and for most people, for anybody really, something like that happening would have an impact on their business. And I think you and I have talked about that it has, but I think you've recovered amazingly. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, Shannon, about your father's passing away, his impact on your business, and what that was like to go through that and to try to keep all the balls in the air with all of your other obligations and still grieve the loss of this very important person in your life.
Yeah. My father passed in January of this year, and it was sudden. Unfortunately, it was, he had a procedure done and ended up having some sort of sepsis and a heart attack. So my sister and I, who are extremely close, we were very close with Michael. So I like to say his name still. Yeah. My dad, I think it was at the end of January, and my business was a little bit slower than normal at that time of year for me. So I was a little bit nervous already. And then when my father passed, it was like time kind of stopped for a little while. But as you know, in this business, it doesn't really. So even, I think he passed January 29th. I wrote a contract 2 days later. I had a client that called and they'd found their perfect home, and they understood that my father had passed, but they really wanted me to write the contract. And looking back, I'm surprised that the mind can just kind of focus in and do what it needs to do. I had a listing appointment the next week. I think some of that was really good for me, to stay busy and to have these. And I knew that my dad, one of the things that he always was great about was really complimenting me on how far I had come in the business. And he was like my biggest cheerleader on it. So I knew that the worst thing for him would be for me to not, to give up or to take more time than necessary. Like, he was very much, hey, everybody dies. He was a detective for 34 years for Denver. He had a different attitude about death. And if I had gone into just slump mode, he would have been like, no, that's not how this goes. You got to get up. This is how it is. So that part definitely helped. My sister is also my assistant. So not only was I operating on having a difficult time for myself, but obviously my sister was hurting too. So it was like the whole year Fresh Start Realty shut down. But we got back going. We had to sell his house pretty quickly. So we had to go through his house. And I kind of think about that time is really when my business started picking up, was about 2 weeks after he passed. Because I actually have 2 months of this year that I didn't even have a closing. So it's remarkable looking back on numbers. And it's something to remember too, is just because you have 1 month where you don't have a closing, that doesn't mean you can't still have an excellent year.
Resilience is really a lot of what this business comes down to, is in a lot of ways, whether it's personal tragedy or business related or just bad luck, this business will beat you down if you let it. And you can't let it. It's not as what did Rocky say? It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up.
Yes, and absolutely.
And that bore itself out this year in your business. And you've I mean, you took a dip as any normal person would do, but you soldiered on, and your dad continues to cheer you on. And that's a really neat thing that can happen, is to find the love and to find the positives and to find the motivators in any situation like that. And it sounds like you really did.
Absolutely. And I'm fortunate. I mean, my office has such a great culture that everybody was really great about supporting me too. When I had a contract that came in on my dad's house, I was a mess, totally started crying. And one of my agents was like, okay, forward it to me. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to call the lender. And we ended up selling it for above list price, which would have made my dad super happy. And the whole transaction was lovely. The agent on the other side was great. And the agent didn't know. I mean, we disclosed that, that I was related to the seller, but we didn't you just I couldn't talk without crying at that point about everything. So I thought it was best to try to keep everything okay. But a lovely woman moved into the house, and she had written a love letter, which I know it had no impact on which offer we selected, but we got to read the letter after they were under contract, and she was moving to be closer to her sister, and it was exactly the type of person my dad would have wanted in his house. So it was good. That's wonderful. And it leads me to what I want to kind of wrap up this conversation on. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think it's really, really helpful. But one of the differentiators that you have, and it relates back to that person who bought that house. And I hear it as you and I discuss all of your transactions in our coaching sessions, is your customer service. Now, a lot of agents will say that my customer service is really good, but yours, I believe, is different. Your relationships with your clients is different. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you do that. You seem to form these really, really close bonds with people.
through the process of either selling their home or buying a home. And how do you do that? Help us decode that, because there's a lot of folks out there trying to figure that out.
So I think it comes down to just genuinely caring about my clients. I take it just as hard as they do if there's something that's going on that's not going in our direction of what we were trying to accomplish. I also listen quite a bit to them, and I want to know more about their family and their the things that they enjoy. And I started with that when I was newer, and it was really to kind of for closing gifts. It was like I really enjoyed doing these baskets, and I was always trying to personalize them. But it became more. I've always told all of my clients that at the end of it, I want you to feel like I'm your friend, I'm your confidant. So what you tell me is, it stays in with me. So I keep in touch with everybody through pop buys and through social media. I think I've maintained a good presence with my clients on there too. It's not always the phone calls. It's just really making sure that you're putting their best interest first. I think Andy was the one that told me, like, don't ever worry about the paycheck. The paychecks happen. You just concentrate on your client and what they need. And that has been the smartest thing. I don't even look at a CDA until you should look at them, but I don't look at them until I'm at closing. But I just don't, because I feel like it's a process that will come to a good conclusion as long as I'm doing everything that's right by my clients. And it can be hard. Everybody has challenging clients. I mean, I do too. And but to also remember that it's really stressful when you're buying or selling a home, and that it might not be their very best self. Sometimes when you're going through a crisis or when you're going through a change, you're just not really, you might take it out on someone else. And so if they do take it out on me, sometimes I try to always take it with a grain of salt, that it's tough. And to remember that, to be kind and to just listen to what they're really asking for.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up is just listen. And listening is hard to do for us salespeople who like to and are good at speaking, but listening, truly actively listening and using all of the data that the person we're communicating with is giving to us to help build that relationship and strengthen our level of service, I think is so, so critical. So Shannon Byerly with Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage in Colorado, thanks very much for being on the show. It's an honor to know you. It's an honor to work with you. And I'm sure the audience appreciates everything that you shared today.
And a shout out to you, Bob. I've blessed to work with you as my coach, and I've referred other people, and they are just so happy to be working with you. You really care about us as your clients, and we very much know that we are lucky to have you. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad I recorded that. Thanks, Shannon. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy the episode, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.